Divorce is one of those life events that looks simple from the outside, but feels like an emotional earthquake from the inside. It can shake your identity, your routines, your expectations, and the version of yourself you thought you had to be. For so many women, the shift becomes the beginning of a completely different kind of healing. And for so many women, especially in cultures where divorce is still whispered about or judged, it becomes a deeply lonely journey. A journey filled with second guessing, grief, guilt, and the constant pressure to stay strong, even when everything inside you feels like it's falling apart. But divorce can bring also a new beginning, the first honest moment where a woman finally asks, who am I without all the roles I've been performing? Today, we're having a conversation that cracks open the emotional truth of divorce, what it actually feels like, what it takes to heal, and how women find their way back to themselves in the aftermath. I'm excited to have Nisha Mody on here, and she is your healing hype girl. I sought her out on TikTok actually because I loved all of her content, and I'm like, I need this woman on this podcast. She's a life coach, an author, and speaker living on the home of the Tongava peoples, also known as Los Angeles. Nisha loves to use her voice and connect with others. Her lived and clinical experience, fascination with language, relational living, and passion for connecting with others combined with her commitment to liberation are central to her work. Welcome to today's episode of Her Energy Unlocked. Nisha, I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much, Mandeep. Thank you for the invitation.
It's so nice to see your entire journey, and we'll get into it throughout today's episode. But why don't you, for the people who are not familiar with you, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a divorced woman. I'll start with that because I know that's one thing we're really going to dive into today. I got divorced about 11 years ago. I was with my now ex-husband for 8 years between dating and marriage. And I'm Gujarati Indian. I was born and raised in the States, and he was the same Gujarati Indian guy, born and raised in the States. We both grew up in Chicago. And I grew up very academically oriented, and that was pretty much my worth. I wasn't like someone who at that time I didn't feel like I was creative or athletic, so I really put all my worth on academics. And between feeling like I needed to have a purpose and a passion in life and feeling like I needed to have the perfect rom-com version of a man. I grew up in the 90s, you all, so that's, what I had. That has really led me on my own journey of not just seeking to escape my family in a lot of ways. I grew up with very loving parents. I felt very safe at home in the sense that I knew there'd be food on the table, things like that. But I didn't always feel like emotionally safe. And that did impact, the relationships I got into. So, just to kind of, I know we'll get more into this stuff, but between I've had 6 careers, but by the time I turned 40, I'm 44 now, which ended with me being a life coach, navigating my journey in that, and also navigating my romantic relationships and realizing the difference between escape and freedom, and which I'm writing about in my upcoming memoir. I'm really understanding what did I want in a relationship, and what I thought was freedom was actually escape. And yeah, I'm excited to chat with you more about it.
Talking about escape, it's this, and we talked about this prior, it's like we go from our parents' house essentially to wherever we get married house, whatever
Yeah.
that is. And so we've never really had that freedom. And it wasn't really my mom, but extended family is after you get married, you can do what you want,
Yeah.
which is the biggest load of crock. Are you kidding me? No, you cannot do what you want. You're now in a relationship with a man, and he may have different prescribed outcomes of, or what expectations he has. And so you're kind of sitting there. It's nice to see now the next generation. That's where my hope always is, that this next generation of women who are being brought up, at least in North America, a lot more progressive than what we think. What surprised you most about yourself throughout this whole journey?
I think I'm actually surprised that after I got divorced, I realized I didn't care about getting married again. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't want to be in a relationship. I am in a relationship of over 7 years. I just didn't care about getting married again. It just stopped mattering to me. And that honestly came from from a political perspective, but also just from a feminist perspective, which is political as well, that To me, it was the relationship that I wanted to care more about rather than the institution itself. I thought, I just grew up being like, I thought about my wedding. Like I was very like girly in that way, I would go to weddings and see stuff. I was so serious about my decorations and my outfits and all that stuff. And I had a great time at my wedding. It was awesome. But I just like literally don't care anymore if I ever get married again. And I have the feeling that if I do, it'll be more of like I need a health insurance type of situation. Like I have to. So, yeah, I think that surprised me the most.
It's interesting. I think there's been an influx of South Asian creators on social media, and their kind of lead into it is their wedding, is this is how they're going to debut their influencership. That's what I'm going to
Yeah.
call it. And as somebody who's been married for 22 years, I'm like,
Mhm.
having vinyl flooring with your initials on, it's not the be all and end all of marriage,
Yeah.
because you're going to have real things to deal with, relationships. And I've actually talked to therapists on this show, just the emotional work, healing your trauma. Oh my God, we can get into it.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so growing up in an Indian household, what did you learn about marriage and what it should look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I feel like my parents' relationship wasn't bad or anything. Like my
Mhm.
parents loved each other. It was an arranged marriage, but I still saw love. Like every day my dad came home from work, he kissed my mom. Like I feel like a lot of they see kids in my generation never saw their parents like kiss each
Yeah.
other. But at the same time, there was tension, and I know my mom had like hardships with her in-laws and other things. And I feel like also in my family, my mom was more of the matriarch. My dad was more passive. My mom kind of like made certain decisions, and they were usually on the same page, but it was just that my mom was very controlling as a person, is still, but has chilled
Mhm.
out because she's older. But and I've healed a lot with my mom, thankfully. But the fact is that I felt very, very controlled growing up. And I think what I saw, it's not like I aspired to be my parents in a relation. I just saw them as like, well, they had an arranged marriage. They've made it work, but like, and they have their issues, and they had plenty of arguments and things like that. But I more so aspired to, I think, what I saw in media, which was the rom coms I watched, and also like these Bollywood stuff. Like because I'm going to be so in love with this person, everything will be fine. Kind of banking on that initial spark and like the intellectual connection, realizing how actually growing up, all the wounds that I had from my parents, from the control my mom had on me, is going to bite me in the ass eventually.
DDLJ, Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge. That was the movie that Raj went into the field. He left England, went to India, got on a train, found Simran's pinned, opened up his arms and played that, I think, ukulele, whatever he had. And every girl I know was like, I want my Raj, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And yeah, when I rewatched that during COVID, I rewatched it with my daughters. I'm like, oh, we should watch some Shah Rukh Khan movies. They were like laughing. They're like, where did he come from? What is this? And
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
know.
I used to love this stuff growing up.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, okay, we're in a different time where girls can
yeah,
see through this.
yeah,
Like, what's
totally.
it?
Yeah, now I watch some of that stuff, I'm like, what is this brainwash? Yeah, it shows how much like media, which is obviously shaped by patriarchy, it's shaped by these systems,
Mm,
right? Convinces us of like what our relationships should be. You're right. Like the vinyl flooring, like it's not the vinyl flooring, it's like what's going to happen on the vinyl flooring. It's the fight
yeah.
that's going to happen. It's the tension, it's the joy, it's all of it. That is what's going to actually be what the marriage is. So, yeah.
I've had conversations with friends of mine who have daughters who are my age, and I was asking them what's dating advice you would give your daughters, right? Because we were never
Hmm.
given any advice. It
Yeah,
was
right.
like, marry a brown guy
Yeah.
and, everything's good. Everything will be fine.
Do whatever you want.
And one of my friends told me that she said to her daughter that you should, whenever you're dating somebody or in a relationship, one, marriage isn't the be all and end all, which is very a different narrative than what we were prescribed.
Hmm.
And two, she said, ask him how women are treated in the family. Ask him his health history. How much money has he invested in? And I'm like, oh my
Hmm.
God, yeah, these are real, valid questions,
Hmm.
to be asked both ways, right?
Yeah.
Because just like the partner, the male partner may have some trauma that he hasn't worked through, so maybe the female too, and what she's experienced through her parents, because they are the example of what you think marriage looks like. What beliefs about being a good woman or a good wife did you have to unlearn?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still unlearning a lot of these beliefs. It's hard to, when these things are ingrained, not just like from your youth, but also in society, like in culture generally. For me, it was just being a woman having to adjust. The word adjust,
Mhm.
especially within Desi culture, is so prominent. It makes me like cringe,
Yeah.
that I have to constantly adjust. And that word was never taught to I have an older brother or like any men, like they don't hear that word. And constantly feel like I need to adjust and also fix everyone's emotions, take
Mm.
responsibility for managing everyone's emotions. Those two things are ones that I really had to unlearn. And I also think a lot of it just comes down to like the male gaze, that
Mm.
thinking about how I'm always like being watched by a man. And so therefore I need to perform in that way. And unlearning that is like, no, I could just like be me and be ridiculous and whatever, just be myself. So who is myself outside of the male gaze? Who am I? Because I think we're always someone in relation to something else, right? But what are the relations that we want? What are the relations that we want to create? And how do we stay in integrity with that when there are other systems in place that are not in alignment with what we believe?
So looking back, what were some early signs that your marriage wasn't aligned with who you were becoming? Like, did you have the awakening during the marriage? Like, or was it more?
Yeah. I think the awakening was during the marriage, but the red flags were absolutely there during the dating. It's just that I made excuses for it. And I talk about this in my memoir. Like maybe a month into dating, I had asked my ex-husband to help move my then, new boyfriend to move like a piece of furniture. I just moved into a studio apartment in Chicago. I was like 25, I was like so excited. And I had this like IKEA, one of those cheap IKEA dressers that I just needed to push into a corner. And I asked him to do it, and the particle board between like two drawers, while he did it, he broke it. And I like kind of gasped because I heard it, and it was just something new I bought. And he's like, Nisha, this is just a material item. You can't make such a big deal of things. And he put it on me. And I'm like, you just broke my furniture, yo. Like,
Yeah.
you just did that
Are you
and
gonna
you're putting
repair
it on
that,
me.
fix it, replace
Exactly. And
it?
nothing. No, it was more that I shouldn't be mad about it, that I shouldn't make such a
Mm.
big deal out of a material thing. He completely gaslit me. But the reason it worked is because I grew up with a family and parents, both of my parents, who made mountains out of a lot of molehills. And I thought, and I really disliked that about them. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing here. But it's like, no, you have to take accountability for what you just did. And it wasn't a big deal. Like, I wasn't like, whatever. It was like the dresser was $70. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. But it was more just like that response was very weird. I'm like, if that was me, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'll replace it. Like, just like a
Yeah.
very take
Yeah.
responsibility. You made a mistake. It's fine. Yeah, so that is how the dynamic began. And so
Mm.
it continued to just like happen that way, where I was just continually silenced and told that I was the problem and that he could do whatever he wanted.
And you
Yeah,
accepted that because
I
that
accepted that.
felt
I
comfort
accepted
or
it.
norm.
He made me better, and therefore I had to forget who I was so that I could be better. But really, it was like him molding me and controlling me into who he wanted me to be.
When you say better, is that because, like, in South Asian culture, being married is like every parent's last final checklist? Like, once you're married, that's it. Like, I've done my duty and you've crossed the finish line as a parent, and that's the expectation they put on their kids. Is that what you mean by that?
Uh, that's a really good question. I didn't feel pressure from my parents for marriage because I was ready to do it because I wanted.
Mhm.
Because it's interesting because there's that patriarchal lineage. Like I am my parents' responsibility, and now I'm going to be his responsibility.
Yes.
And I just didn't want to be in their responsibility. I didn't want to be controlled anymore. So I was happy to get married and get the hell out of there. So it wasn't even that. More like just from a personal development perspective. I was always interested in like personal growth and like introspection. That's something that's always been a part of me even before I met him. Like ever since I was a teenager, I was so curious about relationships and everything, which is funny given the fact that I entered like a abusive relationship. But I didn't think about relational dynamics. I just more thought about it from an individualistic perspective, which is funny because I also think that's just a very Western ideological way of not thinking about relational dynamics and power. I didn't get that far. I mean, it was in my 20s. My brain wasn't even fully developed,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where I was. So I was like, oh, he's making me better, but not realizing like that it was a power move too.
Mm.
And so making me better, improve as a person, not make such a big deal out of things. And maybe it was also subconsciously like, then I'll be a better partner and a better wife,
Mm.
Yeah. Cause like, I mean, at that point we were just dating a month, right? So I wasn't like, I'm going to marry this man at that point, but I was happy. I really liked him. And he really liked me. And so that's where we were. But, I think it was just more from, like, a personal growth, which was, like, kind of I'm like, "Oh, okay, if he's making me, like, a better person, like, I need to be with someone who challenges me. I need to be with someone who calls me out on things," you know? But sometimes I think the death of personal growth, and I'm saying this as a life coach, is sometimes, like, constant improvement at the expense of just, like, accepting yourself for who you are. Like, it's okay that I was like, "Hey, you broke my piece of furniture, and I think you should apologize to me." Like, that's okay, guys. So, just if you're
Yeah.
listening out there, it's okay to be bothered by that, right? But more so being like, "I shouldn't be bothered. I shouldn't have a reaction. I shouldn't make a big deal out of little things." Like, okay, but first of all, maybe both of those things can exist at once. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, maybe I could be annoyed and also not make a big deal. And if he had apologized, I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, like, fix it, whatever," you know? I would have moved on. But yeah, that's not what happened.
Yeah, it's interesting because then I also feel these are just observations now, is that when I look back at my life too, whether it be relationships with friends, I now accept that behavior. I'm okay with that. And they're like, okay, well, this is how Nisha's talked to. This is how Mandeep's talked to. This is how I've always talked to them. So they're accepting it. They're not challenging it. And so I'm going to continue. And it's kind of my decision on if I am bothered by it, I have to bring it up with them and say, hey, this isn't going to fly, or I'd appreciate if you do that. But that's we haven't done the work yet because we're still like, "Oh, he's Raj."
Yeah. Exactly. He's Raj. And I need to therefore like be subservient in some way. So already if you go into it like that, and not look at it like this is just a person and hey, I'm a person too. Like how much am I dehumanizing myself in this relationship and only humanizing and putting someone on a pedestal? I was really good at that. So yeah.
And I do think in power dynamics, and I feel like fragile men, and I don't mean to blanket all men. I feel like I'm a strong woman. I feel like from what I get from you, you're a strong woman. And I feel it takes a very secure man to be with people like us
Hmm.
because the world, the environment, the family is always like, oh, well, you know, this or she's that. It's like, well, we both can exist and tune into our strengths in this relationship together. So really, really interesting conversation. Do you ever feel like you were grieving the future you had imagined?
I think while I was in the marriage and there were substance abuse issues, my ex-husband went to rehab. Those things I was definitely grieving, like because there were times where I was like, is he going to be able to stay sober? Because if he couldn't, I didn't know if I was going to be able to stay in the relationship. And at that point, I was still so very in love with him. So I more so grieved it while we were married. What ended up happening is, I mean, I ended up realizing in the end, granted, he had relapsed. My father had died. He had relapsed. Yeah, thank you. And so those things happen like right after each other. Like, and he couldn't show up for me in the way I needed. And on top of it, I had realized that when I had gotten together with him, I was somewhat of starting to be more of like a politicized person, thinking about social justice and all these things. And I realized when and he was generally in the same vein, but I was getting more, especially after he relapsed. I was in Al Anon. For those of you who don't know, it's just like a 12-step program for people who have substance abuse challenges. So it's just for basically it's a recovery program to be not be codependent anymore. And so I had started learning a lot of really great skills from Al Anon. And when he relapsed, I'm like, okay, it's really time for me to put those skills into play. And I started to notice that I had done everything and adjusted myself and loved everything he loved. I loved all the jam bands he loved. He was really into like Grateful Dead and all that stuff. I loved all the sports he loved. And I wasn't doing anything about like the stuff I liked. So I started doing that. And I realized one, I didn't care about sharing it with him. And two, when I did share and the more political stuff that I was interested in, when I started sharing more about it with him, he just kind of shut it down. And I started realizing how much having similar values is important. Like, we don't have to agree on everything. I've been with my partner. We have very similar values. We don't always agree, but we can talk about it, and just talk it through and like, it's fine. With my ex, it wasn't. I just was like, we are just straight up incompatible, and I forced my compatibility with him so he could be my Raj. You know what I mean? And yeah, I just made myself really small and I silenced myself with him and his family, even though my in laws were actually really supportive of me and kind to me. I still silence myself around them to be that good Indian wife.
Hey, I'm gonna add the question to tell your dating daughters is, what are his core values? What does he stand for? And those can evolve over time too, but that basis is still there, is like, oh, okay, this alignment is there. And if you have kids, that's when that alignment's going to come out even more, those
Yeah.
core values. That's where
Mhm.
there's so much conflict in parenting. Oh, my wife does it this way and my husband, and then you're sending your kids mixed messages, is because your core values are not aligned because you're too busy worried about the rap on the floor at the dance floor than asking about, hey, what do you think about these social justice issues? What do you think about women in the workforce and not getting pay equity and, whatever it is? I'll even add, considering how what's going on in the States, is your political beliefs.
Mhm. And those are connected, And I'm not saying you have to be like super political, like marching in the streets, but like how you treat women is a political issue because that means that what rights do you think I should have? Like, what space do you think I should take up? And that is a political issue, whether you're consider yourself a political person or not.
How did your family respond or the community respond when you
Sure.
were ready to end your marriage?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I feel very fortunate in like the way that my mom was very supportive. My dad had passed away. There's a lot of interesting things here that I almost want to write about this or write a story or something where it's like my dad passed away and that kind of led to the breakdown of my marriage. And I wonder if, wow, if my dad didn't die, what would have happened? I don't know. Maybe it would have happened later because I mean, it's not like the dynamics weren't there. It's not like the challenges weren't there. It was just the triggering event. Yeah, but I just does make me wonder because we didn't have kids. So I'm like, would we have had a kid? And like which changes people get divorced with kids, but like it still changes things. Like I never have to talk to my ex-husband again. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's huge. But my mom was very supportive, thankfully. For her, the substance abuse was a big problem, and she didn't want me to be around that. And also, he was physically abusive once, and I told her that, and she was just like, so that was a line for her. But like I said, the funny part was that, and those things were terrible and awful, and I don't think anyone should go through that. But it still came down to our incompatibility was the actually primary reason, which is why I was like, I don't want to do this. Being sober, he was an AA, and there was a lot of things he was discovering about himself and improving that was really good. But at the same time, I just was like, I just don't want to be with this person, But even though it still helped because my mom was very supportive. And honestly, my community, no one ever has ever really said anything bad to me about me getting divorced. So I think for being a Desi woman, that is like really, really unique because I know other Desi women who struggle to leave their marriages because they have zero support. And not only did I have like her emotional support, like, and I didn't necessarily need her to do this, but she saw it as her responsibility to like pay for my divorce lawyer. Like I was like, no, it's fine. I'll do it. But she was like, no, she saw it as her responsibility. And while it wasn't like to me, it wasn't even financial support. That was also emotional support. It was, and that's what I need from a parent. And I say this all in juxtaposition with a lot of tension I have had with my mom as being controlling. It was interesting because my mom has always showed up for me, even though I've had a lot of challenges with her, even though I will say that I absolutely wanted to get away from my family. And I thought a man would be a great way to do it. That would be acceptable, and aligned with my rom-com dreams. But at the same time, my mom showed up for me and she always has showed up for me and she's been there. And I think it's one of those challenging things of being the child of Indian immigrants or Desi immigrants is that, and I know not all parents are like this, but like they do have that sense of responsibility generally, at least what I've noticed. But I also do know a lot of people don't have that support. And I understand that can make it really hard to make a big decision like this. I mean, I was going to do it anyway. I don't think I wouldn't have not done it. But I will also say at that time I was a speech therapist. I could have gotten it. I haven't done it for 10 years. I still get recruiting emails. It's a very in-demand job. So that was another reason, something that made it easy for me to get divorced because I knew that I would be okay financially. I didn't have to depend on the relationship to survive. And even if my mom didn't support me, yes, that would have sucked from a emotional standpoint, from a family standpoint, but I would have been okay to do it. And I have a lot of I have very good friends and very supportive people in my life. But with that being said, yes, I'm really, really grateful that my mom, and I have a brother too, and he was very supportive as well.
In regards to, though, the women you work with, but what are they discussing with you?
Yeah. There is a lot of guilt that ends up being internalized into shame because guilt is like I feel bad and shame is I am bad. And when we move from I feel bad to I am bad, it is really hard. It's possible. It's absolutely possible. I've done it and I've coached other women to do it, to unlearn that and decondition ourselves or have the tools to catch yourself and be like, wait, is that what's happening? Is this a fact? Am I bad? Or have I been taught that this is a rule that makes me bad? How can I support this person while still having boundaries? Like there are ways to not feel so guilty. But I think guilt and shame are big, as well as keeping yourself small. And honestly, what ends up happening is when you feel guilty, you don't stand up for what you believe and what you think, or even sharing just how you feel and what you need. Whether or not those needs are met, even sharing it is, I think, revolutionary for women to do. And while I work with all, gender nonconforming folks and women, and a majority are people of color, I would say.
Mm.
But that is something, a theme that goes across, whether it's working through relationship challenges, work, it's something that permeates all the aspects of our lives. And that's one thing I realized too. Yes, this was impacting my relationship, but okay, how is this impacting my friendships? What boundaries did I have with my friends? How is this impacting how I show up and what I agree to do in the workplace, especially not just as a woman, but a woman of color?
It's probably been the first time they've been asked, "Hey, what do you want?" Because, we went from our parents' home to the in-laws' house, and it's the first time where we have the space to be like, I don't know what I want, but I know what I'm feeling right now, which is the guilt and shame that and stepping into it's gotta be hard. It so, what helped you heal? Like, what were the things that you did? So if somebody's listening to this and going through the process, whether they're thinking of divorcing, or in the middle of the divorce, or post-divorce, what helped you, or what were the daily things you did that you found real good value in?
Yeah, great question. So, as I was actually like going through the divorce process, I had a really great therapist, and I will name that she was a white woman, but she had really strong like cultural humility skills. And so I felt very safe with her. I know not everyone has that experience with white therapists, but for me, it was helpful navigating a divorce from an Indian man. So that was extremely helpful for me to just uncover what my patterns were, not just to say, like, help me through this divorce, be like, what's happened here? How did I get here in the first place? And so a lot of it was talking about my relationship, but also with my ex-husband, but also talking about my relationship with my mom and growing up and how I came to be this way, how I came to accept, not being treated well, how I came to also, in all honesty, what was my part in this relationship? Because yes, while it was an abusive relationship, I participated in it and I'm not taking blame for the abuse. It absolutely was not my fault and I did not deserve it. But yeah, there were times that the control that my mom wielded over me came out me trying to control him because things were so chaotic.
Yeah.
And, had I understood this before, I probably would not have stayed in the relationship as long because I would have realized, like, okay, I'm just trying to manage this, but this is not a situation for me to manage. And therefore, maybe I shouldn't be in it, because I shouldn't have to hold all of this. So therapy was extremely helpful. I also started just reading lots of books and that were more politicized. One book that really was transformational for me was a book by Bell Hooks, a Black feminist academic, called All About Love. And what I loved about it was that she talks about the difference between codependence and interdependence in a relationship. How are you making your happiness depend on someone else's happiness versus how can your what do, like you said, what do I want and what do you want? How can we relate to each other? How can we
Yeah.
understand each other? How can both of our needs potentially be met? Or who else can meet my need? Like, your partner doesn't have to meet all of your needs, and that's
No.
okay. And that's something that I, realized as well. Like, I was constantly wanting him to meet every single one of my needs and vice versa. We were both codependent on each other. So reading really, really helped me. Going to therapy helped me. I also left my profession of speech therapy because I realized that I did it. I went to grad school. I started it right after I got married. And I entered the profession because I thought it would be a flexible job if I had kids. And then, I realized I never wanted kids. And I had told my ex husband that when we were dating, and he was like, I want kids. So then what did I do? I compromised and said, okay, we'll have kids. I'm just going to have to do it in a way that's going to make me make sure I have energy. So I'll be a speech therapist. So I'll have maybe summers off if I'm at school, or like I can work part time if I need to. Like, I literally adjusted. And there were a lot of things I liked about the profession. It's not like I hated it. I
Yeah.
wanted to do something I liked. But I realized after I left him, I was like, no, I don't actually want to do this anymore. Like, literally changed my profession. So that was also a big, transformation for me to leave a profession I, spent 2 years in grad school, all this stuff for, and not do it anymore.
Wow, the decision on having kids and how many kids and who's raising them
Yes. Whew.
and who's participating in that, because we all grew up, well, most, I will say, I'm going to blanket the statement and I apologize if you're like, well, not in my household.
Yeah.
I'm going to blanket the statement that it's usually, mom takes on.
Yeah.
And that's actually persistent and consistent in all cultures, like even North American culture. We see all
Absolutely.
those studies where the unpaid labor, falls on
Yes.
the mom and stuff. So having those conversations. I will say there's glimmers of hope. I do see younger male relatives in my
Mhm.
family who are extremely hands-on, and it warms my heart because there is progress and there is change. So that's a good thing. And I will say that, yeah, journaling, therapy are
Yeah.
such great spaces for you to be able to be expressive on the thoughts and feelings that are in your head that sometimes you may not have the time, space, or capability to do. So I really
Yeah.
believe in that. That's awesome. So what part of the healing took a bit longer than expected?
As I mentioned, I am in a relationship, a long-term relationship, and it's not like my wounds don't get triggered. They absolutely
Mm.
get triggered. And even with my mom, those wounds get triggered still. So it is always going to be, and the more you heal, the more things in your body come up, right? Because you're like, okay, I've done this, and your body's like, oh, okay, here's more. It's not
Yeah.
linear. It's not like healed, check that off the list.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm healed
so
from this part of our
yes,
relationship.
done with
No.
that. Yeah, no,
It's kind of
it's
like
like, go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say I spoke to somebody else, and they talked about it's kind of like grief. Like some
Yeah.
days you're good, and some days you're like, oh, wait.
I mean, my dad passed away 13 years ago, and and even though I don't know, my dad was very like emotionally repressed, not very chatty person. So I've had a very different relationship with him than I do with my mom, which was much more. I have a much more intimate relationship with my mom, and a lot more wounds with my mom,
Mm.
and a lot of love too. And my dad, it was like more distant, but I realized what our relationship was, and so yeah, I still grieve. 13 years later, the grief still comes up every day, honestly. And yeah, with the healing, everything just it takes time. And one thing I forgot to mention, you mentioned the journaling. This is huge for me for my healing process was that I started writing. I started
Mm.
writing about my life. I started writing about, my relationship with my mom, with my relationship with my ex-husband. I started publishing in actual publications. And I realized like I love writing. I started expressing myself. I started finally using the voice that had been suppressed in my relationship, using it for good, you know? And people started feeling seen. I wrote an article like in maybe 2017 or 2018 where, I mean, I had people coming out of the woodworks thanking me for what I wrote. Like this girl I went to first grade with messaged me on Facebook, and we weren't even like that good friends. We were just like Facebook friends, you know what I mean? And she's like, oh my God, the same thing happened to me in my relationship, blah, blah, blah. Thank you for writing this. And I was like, wow, I do it as a way to express myself, but knowing so many people feel seen and supported, especially women. Like you said, these were women of all races, classes, everything. It's a broad issue amongst women who experience this inequity in their romantic relationships. So that was a huge tool of healing to not just express myself, but also be seen and connect with other people. So yeah, I also wanted to mention that because I was like, wait, that's huge. That's what's leading to me writing my memoir. So yeah.
Oh, that's really neat. I never understood why people, even like my daily tasks, why do you need to write it down? It's all in my head. It's because I'm a firm believer that putting that paper to pen, visualizing it, just there's a release somewhere,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. It connects your body and your mind together.
How did the divorce impact your relationship with yourself, your confidence, your intuition, your inner voice? And then I'll get into dating again and what that was like.
Yeah. I actually wrote the article that I talked about that I wrote. I forget. I feel like it was 2018 or something. It was called "Why I Brag About My Divorce," and my divorce for me was like a celebration. Like I was just like, "Oh my God, I'm free!" Because I was so proud of myself for being like, "Wait, this is not okay." I have completely quieted my voice, and I have so much to share with the world. And I'm going to do that on my own. And if I'm with someone, they're going to be okay with it. And if they're not, I don't want to be with them. And that was just like light bulbs, like Christmas lights, like everywhere. And so for me, my divorce, I don't define myself by my divorce, but it was a defining moment for me to be myself and to not apologize for who I am. And don't get me wrong, there's times where I've made myself small since I've got, those things have happened. Like I said, healing takes time and there are old wounds that come up. But now I'm able to remind myself about what I went through and have this like felt sense memory in my body about what that feels like and what I'm capable of. It's really improved the relationship with myself because of the healing that I've done. And yeah, I mean, in terms of dating, I honestly started dating pretty quickly, even before my divorce was official while we were in the divorce process. And, I call myself a serial monogamist. I'm just going to admit it. Like, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just kind of how I've operated. I think the longest I've been not been in a relationship, is maybe a year, and this is including from college, like, before I met my ex-husband. Met him after college, and I feel like I really believe in healing in relationships, and all those relationships taught me something about myself. I personally wasn't scared to date. If anything, there was a time I wanted to prove myself. I was like, "Okay, I didn't do this one right, but I'm gonna do other ones right." Such, like, perfectionistic. I'm a Virgo, so yeah. I'm like, it's just this kind of this like, I'm gonna do this relationship right, as opposed to it being a relationship. So like I said, I still had healing and learning to do, but it wasn't hard for me to date necessarily. I even like when I moved to LA from Chicago in 2018, I dabbled in non-monogamy because I was like, I want to see like maybe this is something that's for me, and I still like think it's a great concept and something that's very supportive, especially in addressing what I mentioned earlier, that not one person will meet all of your needs, like not
Mhm.
one partner or not one friend, not everyone's going to meet all of your needs, but you can lean on others. In all honesty, I just didn't want to do it because I'm like, I don't have the time to maintain all these romantic
Yeah.
relationships. I'm like, I was realizing I actually had stopped writing, and I'm like, I want writing to be my mistress, not like all these guys. I mean, it was fun, but like it just wasn't what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
in the long term. I mean, completely support people who want to do that. Yeah, so for me, dating was exciting and like a learning experience, but also a little nerve-wracking because it did challenge like all the healing that I've done, and it reminded me that like I'm not like healed, like there's always work to be done, and people are a mirror for us, and they show us these parts of ourselves, and vice versa.
Well, and I think it's, when we talk about dating and you said every person I dated, I learned something about myself, and that comes with time, right? And the person you were at your 20, and this ties back into your core values. You haven't really established your core values,
No.
right? And then all of a sudden, now you're 40 and, your husband and you are fighting all the time because, you've got kids and you're not aligning on the parenting and because your core values and you've changed and all that sort of stuff. And it becomes to be a lot. And at some point, you have to take ownership and responsibility for the decision to get married, right? And decide, okay, how do I want to continue this? So that's why I really liked the therapy or, going through marriage counseling together, as long as both parties are committed to wanting to find that middle ground, because you're right. Things I'm interested in, my husband may not be interested in. So I could still do them and find that outlet somewhere else to serve my purpose. But that's because we're redefining what our partners look like. Really, really interesting conversation. What did you learn about boundaries, self-worth, and self-love that you didn't know about before?
Yeah. I think what comes with a lot of that guilt is not having any boundaries. And in South Asian households, like there are no boundaries. Like especially from earlier generations, I think it's happening now, but like it's taken until now for us to say like it's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to meet our needs that are not the same needs as what our parents or someone else wants. And the first person I made really realize I needed to make boundaries with was my mom, especially after my dad died. I wanted to go and help her all the time and do things, but I also realized like, and I mean, I also realized that, I had my marriage, which was having its own challenges that I needed to address. My mom still was like, had her controlling self. You constantly be there for her and always come over. She would make me feel guilty about not coming
Mm.
home and things like that. When I was in Al-Anon, I was struggling with this. And someone from Al-Anon told me something that just really blew my mind open and gave me permission to make boundaries, which is that it's better to feel guilty than it is to feel resentful. And I was like, you're right, because I'm going to feel resentful of her. And then you know what? Whose fault that is? Mine, because I didn't stand up for myself. I'm an adult. I can do this. She doesn't have to like it. And I think because I started making boundaries, I started having more space to answer that question, like, who am I? What matters to me? And that helped me have more love for myself, have more self-worth, because I realized like, hey, look, I can actually do something hard, and that is courageous. And what else can I do? If I
Mhm.
could do that, if I could stand up to my mom, right? Like if any of us could stand up to our moms, like we could do anything. We're invincible, right? So that really did help me increase my own sense of self-worth because I didn't grow up. It's not like my parents put me down. Like I did really well in school and they definitely like were proud of me, but I don't think my parents were ever like, you're worthy,
Mm.
don't ever let anyone say like, I never got that messaging. I really wonder what would be different. My parents have full confidence in me, which led me to be like, okay, like a sense of hyper independence. Like I have to like be the person that figures everything out. So, I mean, now my mom says more, that she is proud of me, that, I've done a lot and she's rooting me on, like, which I'm really grateful for. And I still wonder, like, what about when I was younger? I kind of needed it more in those like critical development phases, especially when it comes to a man. Like, don't accept anything. Like, my dad never said, like, don't accept, this from a man or anything like that. He was kind of like wary about some guys and stuff like that, but he never actually was like, don't be in a bad relationship. You're better than this, like, I really wonder what would have been different.
What would you say to a woman who's listening right now and she's either about to head into a divorce, is in the middle of divorce, or is post-divorce, and she feels stuck and scared? What is one thing you would want her to take away from today's conversation?
I think the first thing is there is another side. There, you will come to the other side, and there is so much good that's going to be available for you. Care more about what you think than what other people think. And have you ever asked yourself, what do I think? And I think especially in the, lo kya kahenge, like, environment, I think that's really important to go beyond, what will people say. And lastly, that if you want to be with someone in a relationship, be with someone who makes your life better.
I know it sounds simple. I know, yeah, but it's not. It makes your life better in one way, shape, or form. If they are
Yeah,
dragging the soul out of you and your energy and your sparkle, why are you with them? Like, seriously,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? And it could
It's like
be,
very simple, but it's everything.
yeah, and the answer could be more complicated. Well, we have kids, we have finances. I get all of that. But then you should really question then where you're putting your energy. Because at the end of the day, you do have only one life to live. And then especially if you have children, they're observing all of this.
That, I mean, I don't have kids, but my boyfriend is a child of divorce, and he was like, things were so much better when, our parents got divorced. I think he was like maybe 13 or 14 when his parents divorced. He's like, things were so much better. And, in his life, and like, your children also see like, oh, I have permission to leave a bad situation.
Mm.
And that to me is like huge, that like my mom did it versus my mom accepted and tolerated abuse. Especially, I'm not saying there are divorces that happen when there's not abuse too, and that's also completely okay. But like, she decided, or he decided, either one, that like, I don't want to be in a relationship that's not making my life better. So yeah.
That's really, really great conversation. So what is next for you, Nisha?
Yeah. So I am writing my divorce. I'm writing my divorce. I'm writing a memoir about my divorce. I am almost done with the first draft. I'm hoping to have the first draft maybe done by like um January or February. We're recording this in December. And then I will, I guess, start working on the second draft. I'm going to start pitching it to some agents and whatnot. I'm going to try the route to get it traditionally published, but we'll see what happens. And then, if that doesn't happen, we're publishing this baby no matter what. I really encourage people to follow me along in my journey by signing up for my newsletter. I'm also going to invest more in YouTube next year. I'm saying it now, so I do it. I want to do that next year. I said I would last year, and it didn't happen. So yeah, I know I'll be sharing all the links in the show notes for you. So definitely follow me along. Whether you want support to move through some challenging relational issues, especially connected to your relationship, because I always say your relationship with others impacts your relationship. It starts with the relationship with yourself. So if that sparks an interest, or you want to follow me on my memoir journey, I also love to read and like annotate and really get into books and make connections. Anyone who coaches with me knows I'm like, okay, I read this thing the other day. Like, that's the kind of coach I am. I connect the dots. And not because you have to be like someone who reads a lot, but if that's something you're into, I'll be writing more about that on my Substack.
Oh, that's amazing. And I follow her on TikTok. I know you've had
Yes, and
some
TikTok.
couple controversial TikToks
Yeah.
that
Those
men
are the
were in
good
your
ones. Oh my
comments.
God.
They were
Right?
so
Yeah.
bothered.
I'm like, aren't you proving my point right now? Like, that's what they're doing. Like, you're proving my point. Thank you. Yeah. Between that and just like random messages from they see men being like, you're beautiful. Do you want to marry me? I'm like, why? Why? No,
Are you looking
it's
for a
hilarious.
sugar? I get those. Are you
Yeah.
looking for a
Oh
sugar
yeah. I
daddy?
get
I'm
the
like,
sugar daddy ones.
what?
Yeah.
Like,
Like,
no, I'm
on
good.
TikTok? Yeah, no. I'm like, I need some more validation, more verification right now. But yeah, TikTok, I'm sharing more about like brown girl problems journey.
Mm.
So yeah, definitely follow me there. That has been a lot of fun.
Which I will put all in the show notes if you want additional access to Nisha. This was so insightful. I just want to thank Nisha for providing such great insight and so many things to reflect upon. Conversations like this aren't always easy, but they are necessary. Divorce isn't just a legal process, it's an emotional journey that reshapes who you are, what you believe, and how you want to live moving forward. And if you're listening today and something in this conversation felt familiar, comforting, or eye-opening, I want you to pause and really acknowledge that it means you're doing the inner work. You're reflecting, you're growing, and even if that growth feels slow or unsteady. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and continue the conversation over on Instagram or TikTok at Her Energy Unlocked Podcast. I cannot wait to hear from you. And until next time, remember your energy is yours to reclaim, your story is yours to rewrite, and your next chapter is waiting. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.